today's video, we're going to go through the government super scheme for first home buyers. We're going to go through how it's going to work, who it's going to benefit. There's actually some good benefits that are going to come from this, and who it's going to negatively impact by potentially pushing up property prices. So we're going to break it down and we're going to go through an actual case study on the types of people that this is actually going to make a massive difference and save on a lot of costs, and equally the ones that it's going to be disastrous for. So Nathan, break down the scheme and the major headlines, I guess, how it's going to work.
So the good thing with this scheme is it's not limited based on your wage. We've seen other schemes in the past where the limitations were price capped. If you earned over 125,000 as a single person or 200 grand, you couldn't get the first home super savers, first home loan deposit scheme. So that's an excellent sort of benefit there. Effectively, it's if you've saved a 5% deposit, you can access your super up to and including 40% or no more than 50 grand can be withdrawn superannuation. So that can be used directly to purchase a property. Now, allowing the 50 grand released or lesser will mean that you can actually have a larger deposit and you can buy a property sooner, is what the coalition has mentioned there with the scheme. And the main thing that I like about this scheme is that if you do release the funds, so let's say you pull that 50 grand and the property doubled over the next 15 years, you'd actually need to pay back 100 grand to your super fund at time of selling the property. So any funds you do release will be paid directly back in the scheme. On the flip side, if you did buy a property for 500,000, you put 50 grand in and it was sold for a lesser amount, so 450, well then you'd need to return 45,000. So I think the benefits of this scheme are it's definitely not limiting a lot of the first homeowners out there, in that with other schemes, income earners or combined income earners were limited. It doesn't look like it's only for Australian citizens, so we like that about this one here. And the fact that when you do release the funds will go back based on any capital gains.
Yeah, which also based on a study they did in New Zealand, that was one of the concerns with their KiwiSaver, the equivalent scheme, that people were basically just kind of pillaging from their super, taking all the money out, and it was going to kind of shortchange you in retirement. So I think that's one thing that they've probably thought about well. One issue that has been raised, and even the government's admitted that this scheme may push property prices up. Again, it's going to put sort of more buyers in the market and sort of potentially, push that up. I guess, a couple of counterpoints, and we'll include links below because we're not going to get political on this. Some of the pushback has been from industry super groups, because obviously your super's sitting with them. So that's affecting them and the kind of arguments there. Like I said, we're not going to get political for the purpose of this, but one question we have been asked is is it actually going to even matter? Who's it going to impact? Looking at my super balance, I feel like I don't have that much money. Based on, this is actually the ABS's data for average super balances for Australians by age. Obviously, 15 to 24, you've only just started working. You're only going to have about sort of 6,000 in your balance. So I think where this is probably going to make the most amount of sense is sort of anyone aged 25 years and upwards. The fact that you can only pull 40% of your balance, obviously on a lower balance, it's not going to be great, but as a couple with a combined, say, $70,000 or $80,000 in balances, it's going to help. So Nathan, let's walk through that scenario in that exact case.
Well, we see this all too often. So a lot of our first homeowners are in that bracket of that 25 years plus, and what we find is they've either done a trade, so they've gone straight in the workforce, but being apprentices, it's taken a long time for them to actually get in a position where they can afford to buy a property, because starting on an apprenticeship, the wages are low and then they ramp up. Or they've done a university degree, same sort of thing, not really earned much, and then starting to earn some decent money around that 25-ish mark. They've also taken costs when they initially moved out of home. They've saved up a small deposit, but what they find is the deposit they have doesn't quite get them in the property that they're after. So the thing I like about this scheme is that it might actually be able to push you up to the next price limit that you might not have been able to afford. The other thing that I also find, a couple nowadays, if you think about it, living in Sydney or Melbourne or even Brisbane, it's not too uncommon for them to be on that sort of 80 to 90 grand mark. You've got, the professionals that might have done a university degree, engineering or whatnot, they're closer in the hundreds, 120s. So those schemes that are available that are income capped to 200 and below also make it a challenge to qualify for, or their price caps are limiting in that they don't qualify in the price limit that they're after. So in this example here, I thought I'd show you what it might look like for an average couple. Let's say they only do have 20 grand each in superannuation. Well, it doesn't seem like much, which is, is very accurate, but allowing 40% to be released will mean that we can pull out 8 grand of super, which gets us to 16 grand in additional deposit. So in this exact scenario, I've got a couple at the moment that are looking to buy, Jen and George. They both have a combined savings of 60 grand. Now, they're in their late 20s. It's taken them a long time to save that 60 grand up, and they're struggling to build up much more of a deposit. They're looking to buy in Brisbane. So in Brisbane, with a 60 grand deposit, that means you get a maximum purchase price of $550 with a 60 grand deposit.
Without using any other schemes. So.
Without using any other schemes or anything like that, because they don't qualify for it. One of them's a permanent resident, the other's a citizen. So it means they don't qualify, because a lot of the schemes are only for citizens as well. So the good thing with this scheme here is you add the extra 16 grand to their deposit, which gets them to a 76 grand total savings position. And it means that instead of looking for properties around that 550, which they're not really getting much success because they don't want units, they still want to stay kind of close. They're looking in the northern suburbs of Brisbane, and they're finding that they're not getting much luck there. The good thing is with that extra deposit, it pushes their purchasing power up to 650 because they have no problem with borrowing ability. It's that their deposit limits their maximum purchase price. So the beautiful thing with this scheme is it'll help those hardworking first homeowners that don't quite qualify either because of income limits or because they're not citizens or a myriad of different avenues that they can't qualify for. They don't have parental help. They don't have gifts that they can get from anyone else, and it'll help them push above the limits that they were already in. And in the same scenario here, that 60 grand was already a very tough slog to get to. They're paying rent, they've got high costs of living, so increasing that deposit, whilst might seem like it's an easy thing to do, in a lot of instances it's not, and it's a tough slog to get there. So Jaden, what are we sort of seeing as other avenues for first homeowners that it might make sense for?
I think like another benefit of this scheme is just having even just a little bit of extra deposit potentially reduce the owner's mortgage insurance costs. So for example, a couple's looking at buying a home for, someone's looking at buying a home for $750. In the current format, they've only got enough deposit to have to basically get a loan of $685, and the lender's mortgage insurance cost is going to be $27,000, so it's pretty high. But like Nathan said, if you can kind of get that extra $15,000 from super in the example before, your lender's mortgage insurance goes down by $10,000 to $17,000. So it can make a difference, for those lender's mortgage insurance costs. Even your repayments, it goes, from $687. So it goes from $692 a week to $687 to $668 a week. So it's a little savings, it can help, and I guess over time that extra $10,000 makes a pretty big difference as a sort of cost on the property. So I think it's one to definitely consider.
Now keep in mind, this is not your first home super saver scheme, so this is something completely different. This scheme, by the looks of it, can be used in conjunction with other schemes. So if you do qualify for anything else, you can use it there. So I think roundabout, it looks like a scheme that might help those first homeowners that are keen to get in the market, but just missing the mark a little bit to get in the market where once upon a time they might have to wait another 6 to 12 months. Based on the data that we've seen here, they're talking about it taking 11.5 years to save a deposit to get to that 20% mark. This scheme is designed to cut that down by 3 years. So I think all in all, it looks like it's pretty promising. It'll be interesting to see if it does roll out on the 1st of July as they mentioned. And as always, here at Hunter Galloway, we get home loans approved. So if you're living in Australia, looking for a mortgage broker, we're based in Brisbane. There's absolutely no cost for the service, and we deal with people Australia-wide. So call us on 1300 088 065 or visit us at huntergalloway.com.au, and we'll see you next time.